We touched on you writing a book in the previous one, but I just wanted to reiterate. Why do you want to write a book? I feel like there's millions of books out there. Why do you want to write a book?
There is a lot of content that's out there, and the reason why I write my book is because the content really needs to be personal to you. And everyone's story is different. Everybody has different complexions. I know that the authors that I read, there's obviously really good stuff in every business book, but certain people need certain encouragement and certain focal points. And my book in particular is tailored towards the focal points and decision points in my business that I think a lot of business people will have to overcome. But from a spiritual perspective, one of my big talking points about business is a spiritual game. What I don't feel is out there is the combination of the spiritual development with the business tactics. And that's just not developed very well out there. So my book does I think a great job of unifying the business tactics with the spiritual development, and as well as looking at real results that you can get when you do things right and scale your business using spiritual principles. And so that's why I wrote the book. I think that there's a niche for that. And I certainly know when I go around and speak, people have been asking me for more information for a long time. So that's why I decided to write the book.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If people are asking for it, it's like there's definitely a market for it. Do you have like the title picked out and everything?
The title of my book is Speak to the Mountain, and that's from a Bible verse. As I say, I have a strong spiritual backing for this, and I believe that business, of course, is a spiritual journey. And my business journey became successful when I had a spiritual conversion of my own, where I became a born-again Christian. And I had a real revelation at that very moment when I first encountered or first had my born-again experience. I realized that in the Bible, when Jesus says, speak to the mountain, be moved, and if you believe with the faith of a mustard seed, that the mountain will be moved. I realized that that is a literal truth, not a figurative truth. And so what that taught me about business is you can overcome anything in business through prayer, and the world would call that affirmations and positive statements, but really the Bible declares it's possible through actual speaking to mountains, speak to your obstacles, and it's literal. And so I had that realization, and that's when my business life changed. This was in 2012 when I had this revelation, and I started a business at the end of 2012. And the first year we just basically had a month of operations. The first year, full year, we did about $500,000 in business, and we doubled it and doubled it and doubled it and doubled it and doubled it. And so applying those principles consistently and focusing on the spiritual dimension first has been really tremendously successful for us. And of course, all the other things that come with that. It's not about making money, it's about your spiritual development and your spiritual journey. And so Speak to the Mountain is something that I've always come back to. When I see an opposition in business, which there will always be an opposition, you have to pray over it, you have to know what God's promises are for your life, and you have to believe them to overcome that and enter a new territory.
Yeah, no, I love that story. And it's obvious you've put a lot of thought into it and have had that spiritual change in yourself. I feel like a lot of people, they're like, oh, I need to like fix my business in order to make more money or do whatever. But in reality, like they usually need to fix themselves first. And that's, I feel like what you kind of experienced too, is like you need to go on this spiritual journey, and then a byproduct of you changing is your business kind of starting to explode. Is that accurate?
When I talk to business owners and leaders and people who've been in business for a short period of time or even a long period of time, and when I talk about the scaling that we've done, from my wife and myself, just two of us, to 200 employees, revenue that exceeded $80 million last year, and we're always over 50 million and hopefully be at 100 million soon within the next couple of years. They always say, well, how did you get there? Tell me the tactics that you used. Tell me the strategies that you used. Tell me the marketing tips that you have for me. And I always come back to the same thing, and that is, if you're a wreck inside, you will not be able to execute any of these strategies effectively or consistently. The Bible talks about this as the man who built their house on sand. If you don't have your insides worked out, if you don't have that foundation established, I can give you the tactics, and it will, Ecclesiastes says money has wings. The money will come and then go. if you don't have the ability to build the foundation of the business. And a lot of this is business sense, like you have to have a good team and you've got to have accountability and all those kinds of things. But most importantly, you have to develop yourself. You see this with athletes and rock stars. I may have said this before. They get instant fame, what appears to be instant fame, and they have a tremendous amount of money and success, and then they lose it all because they don't have the foundation to be able to sustain that kind of explosive growth and that explosive money that comes in, and it can destroy them just as easily as make them. And so they have to have that foundation. So for business people, build your foundation inside, your spiritual foundation first, and then you can execute the tactics even more effectively, and it'll happen even faster.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, it's like you have to work on yourself. You have to, become the main character almost until you start to see results in your own business.
Actually, I want to talk about this for a second. A lot of people talk to me, I'm in business with my wife, and a lot of people talk to me, how are you able to be in business with your wife? Well, this raises one business principle that is important, and that is don't yoke yourself unequally. My wife and I joke about this because when we got married, we both were kind of a little bit down and out, but we both had a lot of potential and a lot of ambition and a lot of focus. But the joke we have is that elephants don't marry giraffes. And one of the big things that I notice with people in their relationships, either partnerships or in their spousal relationships, is you may have a mismatch. But if you don't have a mismatch, I mean, you've got to look honestly at the person you married. My wife and I, we get along very well because we know what we bring to the marriage and we trust each other 100%. And she has her areas and I have my areas, and we trust and rely on each other. We're good sounding boards. But I don't step into marketing to tell her, what to do except budgeting. And she doesn't come into the administrative side of things and tell me what to do. But we're really good at that, and she's exceptional in marketing. But we just have a good relationship where we work together. But if you look at people, a lot of times, you may blame your spouse, oh, they won't let me do this. The truth is you married them, right? And many times if you have a difficult spouse, you're the problem. So you got to work on you too. This gets back to the other point, work on yourself first. So you want to make sure that, in your relationship, you may complain about your spouse or other things, but the truth is it all starts with you too. You've got to be the better version of yourself. And if you're looking for a husband or wife, another piece of advice for young people, build yourself first. I have a close relative who is a single woman over the age of 50, and she wants to marry a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And I'm like, but you never got your education. You don't have any hobbies. You don't do any, how do you expect to interest somebody? So build yourself first. Become the person who has that kind of spouse. It's really important. And really put a conscious effort into that, because the spouse you marry is the second most important decision you ever make.
Man, I have so many questions, and you touched on so many different things. First thing, and I'll kind of write these down just so I have them for later. The thing about just kind of taking ownership. Have you read Extreme Ownership?
Sure.
I think by Jocko Willink. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like these are kind of similar principles where it's like, hey, everything that happens in your life is ultimately your responsibility. So if you have a bad marriage, if your business isn't growing, if X, Y, and Z, ultimately it comes down to you. Do you think that do you agree with the premise of extreme ownership, I guess?
I generally agree with the premise of extreme ownership. I think that there may be some distinctions, sometimes there are outside circumstances that are going to affect you, right? Mm-hmm. One of the early problems that I had, my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer, right? There's only a range of options I have in that scenario. I had to be with him. I was the only person who he was comfortable with. I had to sit with him in his hospital room for 6 months. I was going through this really hard thing. I had a laptop, and my mind was not in the best place for work, and it was very difficult. I couldn't control that circumstance. I could only control how I thought about and processed and what I did in that situation, and I had to make priorities and tough choices. And I came through that situation, and that was what started me down the road to getting on the couch, sleeping on the couch and losing everything. But I still would have put the time in with my dad. It was a year between he was diagnosed and when he passed away, and 6 months of that was in a hospital, and the rest of the time was in a rehab facility or nursing care facility. But I would have made those decisions the same way I would have any day, because that was the right thing to do by my father. So you have bad things can happen to you. You can only control what your attitude is and your response to that situation, and hopefully you're being responsive and not reactive. But at the same time, many times we look at things that we created the bed of ourselves, and this is where I get into the agreement with extreme ownership, that if your marriage is bad, that's on you. Now, and maybe you married a cheater. Maybe you married somebody who left you for somebody else, or wants to keep being with you but have another relationship on the side. Maybe that's your relationship. And that is something, I mean, I guarantee you, if you look back, you would have seen the red flags. I am speaking from experience here, my own personal experience. There were red flags that I did not see and I ignored and I did not address, and it's my responsibility too. And I had to pay the price for that. And then the other thing is that I think a lot of people have trouble with is you've got to pay the price for that, right? A lot of people, I had friends who've gone through divorce and, they're like, oh, they're this and they're that. I'm like, man, you picked them. You picked them, and now you got to pay the price for that. And if you picked, if you chosen earlier, you followed the red flags, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But right now, you got to get through this. So, it sounds kind of fatalistic or maybe a little stoic, but the truth is that those things do help develop us, and we usually have a signal. When I have my friends who are going through bad divorces, I'm like, I know that story, and but you just want to listen with a sympathetic ear, but don't tell them what they did wrong because they're not ready to listen. But the faster you can take responsibility for what you've done, the better off you are.
Yeah. No, super good. I know, I didn't intend this to go down as like relationships, but I think it's really valuable. What would you say are some like red flags in a relationship? It could be a marriage or maybe a business partner.
I've got a lot of red flags to watch out for because I've made about every mistake in the book that you possibly could have in both relationships, marriages, and in business. I've had a lot of bad missteps. And, and the truth is that it's not necessarily they're bad people. So number one, you got to know who you are and know what your core values are. Right? So this is one thing that, let's talk about a positive thing for a second. My faith is very important to me. Before I became a born-again Christian, I was Catholic. I was a practicing Catholic. It was very important to me at that time too. And my ex-wife, faith was not important to them. And it may not be important when you're 25 or 28, but I promise you, if you grew up in a faith, you're probably going to want your kids to grow up in a faith. And that will become a friction later on. And those kinds of things really get to you. Another thing about a mismatch in ambition, right? If you're really ambitious and someone else is not ambitious, you're not going to get to change them. They're never going to change. So if you have a high level of energy or ambition, you don't marry somebody who doesn't, or at least doesn't appreciate the sacrifices you have to make, because that will begin to wear. You will reach a level of success, let's say $200,000 a year, and that will be enough for them. And you're like, I'm just getting started. And I say $200,000 a year because, again, the money's not the goal, but you'll have a level of comfort at $200,000 a year, which will be pretty comfortable for the one spouse. And you may say, hey, listen, I want to have a major impact in this world, and I want to crush everything and do it and be great. And they're like, why? Don't you just want to watch TV? And that's really painful. So those are red flags. Then there's the real red flags, which are if they lie to their friends, they're going to lie to you. So if they don't have a strong sense of honesty, that's a big problem. So watch out. If they talk bad about their friends, they're going to talk bad about you. I guarantee you'll be 5 years into the relationship and they'll be complaining constantly about you behind your back to their friends. And so that's very, very difficult. So if they don't have that integrity inside, and by the way, if you're doing it, you're a problem too. I'll be straight with you, right? Don't talk bad about people. If you got a problem with somebody, bring it to them. Don't bring it behind their back. And that goes to the business side too. I got into relationships with people and they would talk bad about other people behind their back, and I didn't really think I'm like, they'll never say that about me. 5 years later, they're saying bad stuff about me, and we're in business partnership where, money's dependent on this stuff, and they are not getting as much as they want, and they made a bad deal, and I made a better deal, and so then it gets toxic, and then it's very expensive to get yourself out of that situation. If you can avoid a lawsuit, it's good, but you're probably not going to avoid a lawsuit. And you're going to lose a friend too, or friends, and that happens. I would say one of the biggest red flags, and this is a Oprah Winfreyism, if they had even a hint of jealousy about anybody around them, it's going to be a problem. And this is the truth. If you hear them being jealous about somebody else's success or being a little bit condescending about other people's success or anything like that, when you become successful, you will become the fixation of their anger and jealousy and rage, and they will blame you for their lack of success. You will not know where the toxicity even comes from. So if you see somebody who even has a hint of jealousy about someone else's success, they are not good friends and they're not good business partners. Do not go near them. Just cut them off. That's great advice, and that's happened to me a lot. I've seen them, they're jealous of somebody else, but hey, you saw where I came from. You should know the struggles I had. $250,000, $500,000 in debt with nothing, sleeping on a couch. and then you're successful, and then they say, oh, you don't deserve it. Where did that come from? But the truth is, if they have even a slight hint of jealousy in their body, run. Bad relationship.
Yeah. People should be rooting for you, not like, betting against you. So I was going to say the one thing that hit home with me is like, if it may not seem like a problem at 22, 25, 28, but like as you get older into your career, like it's definitely going to get brought up eventually. So.
Yeah, let me talk on that. The best source on this is a Bible verse, which says, as the twig is bent, so will the tree grow. And so you may have friends who you grew up with, and it may not be a big deal when you're 18 or 20 years old. There's nothing on the line. But when you get to be 30 or 35 and you're buying your first or second, third house or apartment complexes or those kinds of things, that little seed, that little tiny seed, can grow into something really ugly. And as they continue to make their decisions and go down one path, and you make decisions and go down a more successful path, that divergence will become more obvious. And as they started off a little bent, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And you can't help them. I've tried to help people. I sent them the books and the tapes. I remember this one time, one person, I could see the problem that they had. They had a bad mental outlook on things, and I would buy them tapes, and this was back when we had cassette tapes. I'd buy them tapes and books, thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and I'm like, just listen to this. I remember one time I went over to their house and I sat and I watched a program with them, and then a year later, you're abusive in our relationship. You only cared about success. You tortured me with that program. And I'm like, this was good stuff. Like, it wasn't bad stuff. I'm just trying to help you have a better life. But, they rather just, have you give them money, which unfortunately that relationship had to end. So those, all of these, don't make the mistakes I made, please. Let me warn you. It will happen. You are not immune. I thought I was immune. I was an idiot. I was not immune. I thought I was a better judge of character, and all the people I was friends with were super great people. If you get the red flags, watch for the red flags, because it will happen. It will happen, and it will be more painful. The earlier you cut it off, the less painful it will be.
Well, that's the thing too. Is like if you like it's in your best mental mindset to almost ignore them. Like you want to ignore them, right? Because like if you eventually find out like they're not a great person, then it's like coming back on you like, oh, I chose to go into business, so now I made this mistake. And it's kind of like an ego hit, I feel like. So That's why I feel like people dismiss red flags, because they're like, oh, like it's fine. Like I didn't choose the wrong partner or whatever, but then it ends up coming to bite them. So,
one of the big challenges. I have a friend who's in relationship with somebody who's a coach to billionaires, and they legitimately coach 9 billionaires, or personal coach to 9 billionaires. And they say that the problem the billionaires deal with most is finding out who their real friends are. And why is that? Because on the road to $1 billion, they hire all their friends. And this has been true in my life too, where most of my friends have worked with me at one point or another, and sometimes those relationships last, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes you become friends with people you work with, which is also a very tricky relationship to navigate. But when you hire your friends on a way to $1 billion, do they like me because of me, or do they like me because of the money and the job that I provide them? And it gets very, very complicated. That's why we get back to the original Oprah Winfrey, watch out for the red flag. Any jealousy, watch out for. We get back to the watch out for their early red flags, because these things can be there very subtly, that you don't even know it. But watch out for that, and who your real friends are. And life can be lonely. Leadership is lonely. And you want to have friends around you, and you believe, if you're paying somebody, of course they're going to say you're the greatest and all that. And then the minute you have a friction at work, or they're not meeting their productivity goals or whatever it is, that can be really stressful in that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. You said that picking your spouse is like the second most important decision in life. What would you say is the first most important decision in life?
Great question. The most important decision you make in life is your faith. I believe that faith is a choice. I don't think we're necessarily born into it. I think we have some conditioning when we grow up. But at some point, we're called to make a conscious decision about what role faith will have in our lives. And so for me, and for me, it was a very intentional decision. When I was 39 years old, is whenever I had my first real encounter with God. And, I grew up Catholic, but I never had this relationship with Him, and never thought of it as a relationship. But, when I'm sleeping on the couch and you're a couple $100,000 in debt and you got nowhere to go but up, you really start questioning, is there a better way, and what have I done wrong, and what am I missing in life because I'm unsatisfied, and I'd made some money and lost it, and all of those things. And at that point, you have to make a decision what you choose to believe. As a born-again Christian, I believe in the literal truth of the Bible. A lot of people are going to laugh at that, and I get it. But I will tell you, I make a conscious decision to believe the Bible. Why? Well, because those promises reinforce all the beliefs I have about business. So I have to make a conscious decision. And again, we may make fun of it, and it's easy to say, oh, you believe in creationism versus evolution. And I believe in evolution to a certain extent, but I believe there's a divine creator and designer. And the more I can choose to believe in the Bible, the better my life goes. And my life is going really well since I was 38 or 39 years old, and it's going a lot better now than it was before 38 or 39 years old. And so I make a conscious decision, and for me, walking out my faith and talking in situations like this with my people and my clients, they know where I stand on my faith. I'm a Christian. I believe in loving everybody. I'm not I'm not a violent Christian or an aggressive Christian. I'm like, we're all sinners, and I'm the worst. I had a really bad run of a bunch of bad stuff that happened to me and stuff I did, and I'm not proud of it, and I've repented, and I want to be authentic in that space, so I can't judge anybody, because I'd be right up there too. But we try and do better, and we get into a relationship of choice with God. And I feel that if you have a faith that you grew up with, you probably should start there and see where God takes you, because we all have some degree of faith. The Bible actually says we're all born with a certain degree of faith, but we have to choose to develop it. It's like going to the gym. And now I have a lot of faith. I have a tremendous faith. I can take on business situations that I probably couldn't have if I didn't have the kind of faith that I have.
Yeah, it's definitely made a huge impact on your life, and it's undeniable at this point to see like the switch from 39 and now where you are today. Are you pretty active in your church community and your local community? Are you? I guess what is the role of faith play in your day to day?
Faith plays out different ways for different people, but I can tell you how it plays out for me. I'm very active in my local church. In fact, I do consider that the church is the church, God's church, and it's all churches, right? If you look at the way that the church is developed in the Bible, in particular the New Testament, you had different churches. You had a church in Corinth and Philippi and Ephesus. You had these different churches, and I believe they're all God's church. And if we all believe that Jesus is the Son of God in a Christian perspective, then that's what I consider to be part of the church. And so we support a lot of churches. I speak at churches. I like to talk to Christian business leaders. I like to talk to any business leaders, but Christian business leaders, usually I can resonate best with them. And, we support churches really across the country and around the world. My wife and I are very proud of some missionary work we've done in Latin and South America. We've built an orphanage and a school. We provide food and shelter, clothing, and interestingly, toiletry supplies for homeless kids in Latin and South America. We just recently had a mission that went down there. We funded them they were asking for soap and shoes. They just couldn't afford stuff you can't just make, you have to buy. And so hygiene products, we had no idea. So we helped them, provide them with soap and shampoo and things that that they just wouldn't have to try and get clean. And because these are homeless kids who live under a bridge in Colombia. And so we're really proud to be able to support those organizations, and I think by giving back in those ways, God will continue to bless us in other ways. And if I can help anybody, part of what I'm doing this for is to try and help people, grow with the right reasons. Because growing just to make the money, it's not enough. It just isn't. The money is going to be flat. It loses its luster. But when you are able to give back and make a difference in people's lives, like last month, we sponsored 2 full scholarships and raised another $100,000 for scholarships for disadvantaged kids to be able to go to college. You can change the arc of someone's life with that. And so we're always happy to give back, and it's important to have that sense of giving, because again, it's not about you, it's about the impact you can have.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned that obviously faith plays a huge role in your own business. Do you have a favorite verse that kind of helps you get through some tough times, or maybe just a favorite verse in general? I know it's probably hard to pick.
Yeah,
but.
No, it's not. It's actually a great question. So when I was a new believer, I didn't know the Bible very well. And so I went through the Bible, and I started with the promises of God. And you see through the Bible that God makes a series of covenants with different people. He makes covenants with Adam and Eve, and he makes covenants with Noah and with Abraham, and Abraham is the father of faith. So you can see the promises that God had for him. He made covenants or promises to David, and then we see the promises in the New Testament that Jesus talked about. And we see things like Proverbs and Psalms. And so I didn't know what all the promises were, so I would take out these little index cards, and I'd write down the promises that God had that I was really praying for, right? Speak to the mountain. And so I wrote down these scripture verses. And so some of the verses that I have, no weapon formed against me shall prosper, right? That's if I'm feeling like I'm coming up against an adversary or there's a stressful situation that, there's a plan to unseat one of my plans. There's a Bible verse, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. There's another Bible verse when COVID hit, but this was before then. 10,000 may fall at my side, but it will not come near me. And I use that because my father, remember I told you my father and my sister had died of cancer. There was a period of time where I was really worried I was going to get cancer. And so anytime I would hear the word cancer, I would declare that it will not come near me or my family in Jesus' name. And so I would have that prayer verse. It will make you inheritance of the nations. Use what's in your hand. I had there's another Bible verse. It's to Moses, and we had a really difficult situation in the firm. I didn't know what to do, and I was like, I got to do what I can do right here, right now, and that's to use what's in your hand when Moses used his rod in his hand to part the Red Sea. So these are scripture verses that just and so over time, get up and go. The first time I just was trying to decide whether I was going to go out and start my own firm, I said a prayer. I went to a preacher on Sunday. We're talking about Abraham. That's not a biblical quote, get up and go, but it says, leave your country and go to a new place that I will show you, right? Leave your country, your lands, your father's house. And she said, my word for you today is get up and go. And I prayed to God, should I leave my current company and go start a new firm, or should I stay? And the next day, she says, get up and go. So my first verse after Speak to the Mountain was get up and go. And I'm going to do a presentation on that next week for our year end, talk about get up and go. So we had the power to do that. And so I just remember that get up and go was the first seed of this organization. 100-fold return. I mean, I've got a lot at this point because we've been in business for 12 years. But yeah, so I just, I just love remembering the promises of God and thinking about what He's done for us. And, I'll give you all the territory you set foot on. I mean, there's just lots. And I write them down because you can tell I can't quote them so well. So I want to go back and read them again and again and again. So I have it, really, really committed to memory.